If they were told, I'll give you something to cry about, don't cry about that, you're strong, or, oh my gosh, great job, keep doing that, and only validating certain emotions, we're already laying the foundation that certain emotions are good and certain emotions don't ever come to me with that. I can't hold that for you. It starts to inform our belief systems of, okay, I need to act in a certain way to get mom, dad, caregiver, whatever's approval, but then these emotions aren't allowed.
What happens when we're young that begins to set the platform, the structure for how we approach life when we're older?
And you know, it goes back to how their parents taught them how to experience and even express or not to express emotions, right? If they were told, I'll give you something to cry about, don't cry about that, you're strong, or, oh my gosh, great job, keep doing that, and only validating certain emotions, we're already laying the foundation that certain emotions are good and certain emotions don't ever come to me with that. I can't hold that for you. That is not welcome in this container. So then we start to grow up, and our upbringing then enforces us as little babies. And I've got 2 little ones at home. You've met one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to inform our belief systems of, okay, I need to act in a certain way to get mom, dad, caregiver, whatever's approval, but then these emotions aren't allowed. So then we grow up getting in relationships, getting in our most vulnerable interpersonal relationships, interpersonal human dynamics, thinking, okay, these emotions aren't okay. My anger is not okay. Well, I'm gonna suppress it. I'm gonna suppress it, and I'm gonna suppress it. I'm gonna bypass it. I'm gonna shove it under a rug. I'm going to keep going and or numb or distract or do whatever vice or escape so that I don't feel those difficult feelings or whatever we were kind of ingrained and taught when we were young.
Mm-hmm. And that happens more often than we think. "70 million Americans have chronic sleep issues, and 50% of Americans deal with sleep deprivation." You probably dealt with this at some point in your life, whether you just traveling or whether you were really stressed throughout the day or just ate really late or worked out really late. We all come across poor sleep. We know that. But when it becomes chronic, it starts affecting our overall health. Now, one of my favorite brands, Net, is here to help with their incredible new Shut-Eye Chai. Shut-Eye Chai is another one of my sleep go-tos for my sleep hygiene rituals. Now, this one is inspired by 5,000 years of ancient healing tradition and is Ned's biggest product launch to date. It's a mellow, super blend latte for sleep that combines adaptogens, aminos, functional mushrooms, and magnesium. Seriously, one of the best formulas out there, and it's wrapped in a heavenly masala chai-inspired body. If that doesn't set you up for an amazing sleep, you're gonna have ingredients like chaga, reishi, ashwagandha. These are deeply nourishing to the body, so you're gonna get tons of additional benefits. Now, Shut-Eye Chai will help calm the nervous system. It's gonna nourish your senses, send you peacefully into the dreamland that we always wanna get into, right? That deep sleep. It's all natural, made exclusively from functional botanicals, fungi, herbs, plants, minerals, roots, and spices. Now, what I love most about Ned, this company as a whole, all their products, they're transparent. One of the most transparent companies I've ever seen. They share all their third-party lab reports for all their products, who farms their products, even the extraction process, right? So I'm not worried about taking in a powder every single night because I know it's tested for purity and it's clean. Shut-Eye Chai does not contain any CBD, caffeine, melatonin, or dairy. And for me, the way I do it is I warm up some water, pour it in, mix it with the Shut-Eye Chai, put a little bit of almond milk, maybe a little bit of sweetener, sometimes if I'm feeling it, and drink it warm. And it's part of my nightly routine. I do it about an hour and a half after eating dinner, about 2 hours right before I'm getting ready for my sleep ritual. By the time I get into bed, I'm out. So to discover how Shut-Eye Chai can revolutionize your sleep, get 15% off with the code DRG. Go to helloned.com/DRG, enter the code DRG at checkout. That's HELLONED.com/DRG to get 15% off and the sweetest of dreams. Hey everyone, I want to talk about Birch Living. This is the partner I've been working with for quite some time. Now, sleep is so important for me. I'm always excited to talk about Birch on the show. Birch is a premium mattress in a box company that makes mattresses and sleep products that are stylish, comfortable, and environmentally conscious. Now, they have an organic, non-toxic mattress, and it's made right here in the United States. Now, it was important for me to choose a mattress that is made with organic and natural materials. Why? Because I can sleep comfortably knowing I'm avoiding for harmful off-gassing chemicals that are made in manufacturing that are there for the life of the bed. Now, Birch mattress is Green Guard Gold certified. This ensures that all of those chemicals are being tested for, thousands of them, so I can sleep knowing that I'm being protected from the off-gassing. Now, I've had my Birch mattress for 2 years now. I love it. What I love most is, one, how breathable it is and how cool I feel at night, how supportive it is at relieving pressure points in my body. Feels like I'm being held by a cloud. And both allergen and mildew resistant, and made of raw materials sourced straight from nature with Birch. You're gonna get a 100-night sleep trial and a 25-year warranty. The best part about all this is that Birch is gonna deliver right to your door. You don't gotta go nowhere. Free within the United States. It comes rolled up in a box, super easy to set up for yourself. Now, I love my Birch. I think you will too. If you're looking for a new bed, check out Birch. You can click the link below, go to birchliving.com/healthyself and get 20% off of your mattress plus 2 free pillows. If you're looking for a mattress for your little ones, also check out the brand new Birch Kids line. Well, then what is the consequence, or what happens now that we're older and we come to this place? How does that show up in things like relationships or work or business?
Oh, yes. We have a lot of sucky moments. I mean, the whole title of my book, That Sucked, Now What? But I say that, and this mantra kind of came up in this evolution of this book. This is my 4th book. However, I honestly didn't really grapple with that until I actually entered motherhood, where I was then faced with so many of these emotions that I never really attuned with myself, and I wasn't okay. I didn't realize I wasn't okay with anger. I mean, I expressed it, of course, in different aspects of my life, but it then shows up, if we're suppressing it so much, it'll show up in the people that we pick to teach us about life, to teach us about hardship, to teach us about loving ourselves. Because, and I know even for myself, just context, 11 years before I got into, or actually it would have been 8 years before I got into the season of motherhood, or 7 years, I would be in the most toxic and emotionally abusive relationship to teach me exactly about the feelings and the emotions that I had suppressed for so long. So it would show up in the people that we attract, right? To teach us about ourselves, to actually say, hey, what parts of us are we actually not thinking that we're worthy enough to receive love, that we're diminishing ourselves, that we're suppressing our own voice to pacify, to please, because we can't say, actually, I'm not going to tolerate this. Mm-hmm. And where do we then diminish our light? And I mean, this goes into even the jobs that we pick, or the bosses that we attract, the people in our life that kind of bully us in whatever way. It could be friends, it could be even family members. And it's basically that same cycle, or that same pattern will show up in a mirror of a person that's just meant to bring that side of us out so that we can actually express. We can actually feel the feeling that was so discomforting that we've been wanting to suppress and push down for so long. And in my case, it came up so much. It was bursting out at the seams because I was afraid. I was afraid that I would be talked about, because at this point in my life, I was this like big cosmetic dentist, had this amazing practice, yet here I am scared that somebody was going to find out that I was a fraud, that my life wasn't so glamorous from the outside, that it wasn't so perfect like my teeth were, because I was really in this toxic, abusive relationship. And if we peel back the layers of that, well, it actually started because I had lost my mom, my dad, and my brother all before I was 19. So here I am entering my 20s thinking, okay, I'm gonna be strong, because that's what I was told as a kid. I'm gonna be strong, I'm gonna be strong, I'm gonna Neeta coming from an immigrant background, Filipino dad, Filipino mom, Indian dad. You're resilient, Neeta, and you've got to be strong for your younger brother. And so I get into my 20s thinking that, and of course, bypassing all the feelings and thinking, all right, what was I grown up with? Educational drive and success and all of this overachievement so I can overcompensate and not feel, but I can chase something else. And we all have these vices. For me, it was chasing outwardly success and making sure no one would know the cracks in the foundation, that I could probably create and paint this facade that everything is going okay. Because it was, until it actually wasn't, until I would attract that partner that would poke holes in that foundation. So much so that I actually had to go through a reckoning with myself to say, okay, what does strength even mean? Because I couldn't hold it in anymore. And I had to, I remember vividly, it was New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2011, where I finally broke down, shattered into a million pieces. When I talk about resilience in this book, because this book is about resilience, I was taught resiliency meant strength, but I didn't really mean or feel or understand what that really meant. The Latin root of the word, which is resiliere, which is to bounce. And I didn't really know what to bounce meant until you actually take a rubber ball versus a glass and you let the glass go and it shatters like I did on December 31st. For me, it was, all right, this rubber ball, what's different? Well, the fact that it's bouncy, it's got a little give to it. It's got this agility, it's got this flexibility. And that was when I could melt into the pain that I had tried to put in a back corner, in a closet, under a bed, under a carpet for so many years. And I think for so many of us, these are the coping mechanisms that we have. And we have so many tools. This first and foremost, to escape the feels and to bypass. And I knew that this outward success of my high profile dental practice, not even 30, reaching all these pinnacles of success traditionally, but there was such a hollow version of myself that I had yet to explore because I was in survival mode. And I think a lot of us, especially coming from immigrant backgrounds, we are in that survival mode growing up.
All the time, right? Because that's the input we're given by our tribe, the people we learn from what it is to be a man or woman very fast. So I work with a lot of clients, and it's definitely the ones who have immigrant parents who have a lot of difficulty in coming out of that sympathetic survival mode always and always, even when they've built a good life for themselves. Oh, yeah. They're safe, they're good, and they're secure. But it comes back, one thing when you're talking about this compensation, I think you compensated with one of the most dangerous ones. And I believe overworking, overachievement is the most dangerous because not only are you doing it and experiencing it and you're allowed to suppress your feelings, but we are celebrated. You're given awards.
Oh yeah, you're validated.
You're validated. People are saying you're the best, and you go, I'm the best, and then you just do it over and over, right? That's a really tough one. So I applaud you for having that breakdown. Now, right? How many people applaud breakdowns? But it was essential for your reconforming, right? The reconfiguring of that glass that broke into this new version of you that is much more powerful and resilient. But how there's people viewing and listening, they're going, okay, I see what you're saying. Got some things. I feel like I'm holding in emotion and I feel like I'm compensating. And I actually feel like it's getting more dramatic as I get older.
Yeah.
Wow, like each partner I get or every friend that I get or every instance or moment. What's the first step in being like, okay, wait, there's a pattern here. Now what do I do? What's the first step that people can do right now?
Yeah. So in the book, I have the first framework that I talk about. Well, it's your bounce factor. We have to first make peace with our upbringing, right? We've got to look within and look to see, well, what were the patterns growing up? Where did I learn a lot of the coping mechanisms and how was it? Because most of the time, it's so easy to blame other people. It's so easy to blame outwardly our situation, our circumstance, our setback, and kind of project it out into the world. But it takes a certain level of personal responsibility to say, how did I play a role in that? And why did I do the things that I did? I mean, it's easy for me to even be in that victim mindset and not trying to, discount anybody who's ever lived through sexual abuse, any sort of trauma, domestic violence. I mean, I lived through that. But I think also to look outside of that lens and say, yeah, like acknowledge that victimhood that you're in for that period of time. But there's a reason why my book is called That Sucked. Now what? Not This Sucks. Because that would imply that we're still in the suck. And we're not getting out anytime soon. And so the idea that sucked is actually saying, all right, okay, that's an acknowledgement of the past. It's the acknowledgement of, well, here we are now. I can't change the past, but what can I do next? The now what? And so it takes a certain level of that personal responsibility to look inward and say, all right, what was my background growing up? Was my voice suppressed? Was I in a household where I was celebrated? Or was I in a household where my voice didn't have a voice because you don't talk back to elders or whatever the thing is? Or maybe growing up in a household where the boys got all of the freedom to go out and the girls had to stay in, or whatever that was, cultural nuances, the obligations or the expectations that you had because everyone else was a doctor and so you had to go through that, or that you couldn't do X, Y, and Z until you did X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And so, or the helicopter parenting or the tiger parenting. So that would be the first step, is to actually see and make peace with, okay, what were some of the conditions going on growing up? Did you grow up in poverty? Did you grow up with privilege? Did you grow up with any of those things? That's the first piece. The second piece of that is, and I know that even for myself, you've got to say yes to new realities. And what do I mean by that? Well, good stress. Good stress, meaning, and for the first time actually, when I shared this, I was in the Bay Area and I had moved cross country to San Francisco, and I was in the midst of this life change. I had started a nonprofit and I wanted to champion women and girls because I wanted to change my reality and say yes to new things. So I started to invest in female-led startups. Well, it took me to San Francisco. And one of the moms actually from the Bay Area, we'll just say Palo Alto, very like rigorous school system, et cetera, she wanted me to come and speak to some of these moms. And I was like, I'm not even a mom. I'm like very single. Why me? And so they got a hold of my story and they knew the work that I was doing and they wanted to know, can you build resiliency without having such a hard story and loss and grief and all of these things like I had? Is it possible? Because in that year, they had lost 3 people to suicide, and these were young kids. And just automatically, well, their upbringing, was there a lot of privilege? Were they able to identify good stress? And so the second part of what I teach now, because after that mom left that imprint in my mind, I've taken that to heart. And I was doing all of my research and even seeing, what did I do in my own life? What did I actually share and see and observe other people going through hardship? What is that first step? Well, most people will actually completely shift and say, all right, I'm going to be curious. I'm going to lean into curiosity and I'm going to actually do the thing that is interesting for me and take baby steps and say, okay, lean into whatever is good stress. What does that mean? Well, say yes to an acting class, say yes to an improv. The first few things that I did was completely out of my comfort zone, which was, I was a dentist. And I actually said yes to an improv class, which I was always validated by my right answers. And so God forbid me going into improv saying yes and talking in gibberish would actually activate my and actually regulate my nervous system, and actually, you know, have a different way for me to get into, instead of fight, flight, and freeze, into rest and digest and actually play and having fun, to not take my situation so seriously. Good stress can also look like cold plunging, right? Who wants to take a shower that's cold and be in that? It could also look like having difficult conversations. It could also look like sitting with those emotions that do make you uncomfortable, that do actually say, okay, ooh, okay, this feels weird. This feels awkward. Where is this coming from? And to actually lean into that, because it's so much easier to bypass it and say, oh, there's that silver lining again. I'm gonna, I'm gonna, I'm gonna lean into that silver lining. And then the third part of it, and the fourth part we already talked about, but the third part is your emotional capacity. Can you allow yourself to embrace the complexity of both of emotions all at the same time? So when we are actually rising from a sucky moment like a breakup or a diagnosis medically, or maybe a physical challenge or a setback, or we got fired, or we're just in that stuck season of life, can we actually welcome the complexity of both of those emotions? And I look back thinking at my toughest time when I would see, you know, month after month, year after year, my mom kind of getting in and out of remission in her breast cancer. And this was during high school. The fact that, like, I could still pick up some of the morsels of joy seeing that cute guy, the barista at the coffee shop at the downstairs of that hospital, while I would go upstairs to see my mom in the ICU. Is there slivers of joy where both of those feelings can exist at the same time? To welcome that, to feel the paradox of those, to see later on in my life entering motherhood and actually saying, yeah, this fucking sucks that I'm waking up 3 times in the night. But then there's so much joy in watching this little human that I created cry. And so it is the duality of both of those, and to accept them, just like also accepting my rage and knowing where that rage, instead of judging it, because I actually used to judge my rage so much, especially when I went through bouts of postpartum depression with both of my kids. But I didn't really understand what that meant until looking back when I was a teenager and seeing when my dad was diagnosed with his lung cancer, and I was 18, and just remembering I was so angry. But then I thought, nope, Neeta, big girls don't cry. You got this, you got this, you're so stoic. But I was so angry, and then having met that rage and emotion that I could not control, and it didn't have anywhere to go, but to actually allow yourself to embrace it and to feel it, because that's the emotional capacity of you stretching. So that's the third aspect. And the fourth is to really attune to your radical self-awareness, so that you actually are aware of what is triggering you, who is triggering you, and actually sitting with it. Again, the discomfort in that, and seeing, okay, what is still present there? Why is that person still triggering me? What is it that I still need to release from this? Or what is it that they're actually showing me?
And you'll always have a marker up and you're going, okay, hold on. This person was 10 out of 10 for me. Now they're 3 out of 10, but there's something still there. And that self-awareness is always, you're saying, going to be part of our practice onwards, because you got to be self-aware in order to go back through all those steps again and move and move. You just got to know, okay, I'm feeling this way.
Absolutely.
How do triggers feel for people then?
Yeah, they're big. They suck. They're if we're ready, if we're ready to dive into the work, and if we're like, all right, let's welcome that. We can feel it in our body somatically, right? Do we feel it in our gut? Do we feel it in our shoulders? Do we feel it, do we feel those tension headaches? What part of our head feels a little bit more tense? Do we actually feel it in our throat? Do we feel that our throat kind of gets like locked up and we have to clear our throat because we're maybe suppressing an emotion there? Or maybe somebody is triggering us and we're trying to we're trying to hide from it. We're trying to run from it. Our body actually, it's like that book, Our Body Keeps Score. And I think that's where we're asking the deeper questions in our healing of, ooh, okay, yeah, these triggers are amazing. I mean, it's like that pain. They're amazing reminders to actually do a little bit of that introspection that I think is always there. It's not, it's definitely not easy, I think. I think it takes the commitment to say, I'm going to explore this right now, because let's be honest, human nature, we can judge it, but to allow ourselves to drop in and actually take a moment before we react and say, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now, and actually really acknowledging it. Or, wow, I'm feeling jealous right now. I didn't get that thing that I really wanted, and I worked so hard for it, and how come it went to that person?
The awareness around it. That's what it takes. It's just always that, having that awareness. How do you feel it? Where do you feel it in your body? What does it feel like, right? And then connecting that feeling, connecting that emotion to that feeling. What's going on? And then being able to have that awareness. Because oftentimes it gets scary and we resist that,
It gets scary and we want to do something else. We want to numb, distract, avoid.
Get on the
pick up the phone.
Get on the phone. Clean the house. Again, it doesn't even need to be cleaned for the third time this week.
Tidy the pillows.
Everything. And I see it in people, how much we run away in our own flavor, right? And even in family units, siblings even do it differently.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just what we do. It's how we survive. But now, what I always say is the irony is, like, we have this survival mechanism, and as we get older, that mechanism that allowed us to survive, as we get older, all of a sudden it's the thing that makes us sick.
It fizzles, yeah.
Yeah.
It fizzles, and it's like, and it's so appropriate that I'm even bringing this here, because, just even thinking back around how my parents, how they, of course they were told what they were told around emotions, and they just did the best that they could. I think a lot of us just do the best that they could, but a lot of their, diseases manifested as these illnesses. And my mom, her breast cancer, but then it ended up in her lungs. And lungs, of course, from a healing standpoint, is a sign of that grief, holding in so much of that grief. And then also my dad, lung cancer, my brother, an asthma attack, all of these things pinpoint, lungs and grief is that's kind of where the emotional manifestation of where we're holding in that pain. So it was so interesting for me to even connect the dots of my life to arrive at this work, to say, wow, let's feel to heal.
Yeah.
And really, allow ourselves to feel some of those feelings where we're taught so differently. And there's so much shame around it. And there's so much, the guilt of, okay, this emotional perfectionism. I talk about this in the book, where everybody on my mom's side was a pageant queen. And so this idea that you had to be this idea of perfection, and there was only certain emotions that you can elicit, and God forbid you were ever upset or angry, because, we don't do that. That's a lot of pressure. That's enough for a pressure cooker to just one day break. But to actually then be able to see where are we actually holding that in our bodies, and to reject the whole idea that these emotions have to be perfect. And I mean, this whole entire book and chapter of my life was inspired because I got into motherhood, because I was like, all right, we're really feeling the feels real time. Like, it is chaotic, it is messy, we are having meltdowns. And it was around the time of when my son was 2 years old, I think a little earlier, about 14 months, 15 months, he started to fully express. And when we spend time, and, even for the listeners, you don't even need to have a child to go through this. You see any toddler and see how you react when you get on an airplane with them. See how you react when you're seated right next to a baby. Are you going to be like, excuse me, change my seat? Or are you going to be like, okay, well, they're going to cry. And I guarantee you, because I used to be like this too. Oh man, I'm sitting right next to the baby. Oh man. just see how we respond to when other people let out their emotions. And it's fascinating because I actually even was teaching this course for one of our programs, and one of the students said, "Well, what if my client starts to uncontrollably cry? How can I stop them?"
Oh boy.
Yeah. And I said, "Oh, wow. By the way, this was, an emotional release class." And I said, "Well, what's your relationship with them crying?" Because that question had everything to do with the
With them.
question
Yeah.
asker with them than what I was teaching. And so it's so important to pinpoint how we are in relation to another person and where that perspective is coming from to then change that.
Sleep is one of the most powerful factors for upgrading your health. You already know this, but great sleep is super important on every level. For body fat, for muscle mass, for mood, for brain function, and many other ways. Now the problem is, taking melatonin over time can be problematic, right? You want your body's own inherent melatonin levels to be at its peak right before you go to bed and throughout the night. Now, there's a really good approach to doing this. Giving your body the building blocks for melatonin is a much better way than taking straight melatonin. This is why BioOptimizers came out with a brand new sleep formula. BioOptimizers sent this to me as a test run to see if it works, and I reported back to them, it works. It's really strong and it's really good. It knocks me out every single time I use it. I use it when I'm really buzzed up at night and I have a lot of energy and I need to really wind down. So after years of trial and error and sleep tracking, they finally launched their new groundbreaking sleep formula. It's called Sleep Breakthrough. Sleep Breakthrough is a delicious sleep drink that supports your natural melatonin production and relaxation without creating that dependency that we can get with taking melatonin over and over and over. It targets 5 different sleep pathways, 5, to give you your best sleep ever. You're gonna fall asleep in minutes, you're gonna stay asleep through the night. It's gonna help you with the right amounts of REM and deep sleep. You're gonna be dreaming more, I know I do. And best of all, you'll wake up feeling rested, rejuvenated, so you can have the best day possible. For an exclusive offer to you, the Heal Thyself listener, go to sleepbreakthrough.com/DRG. In addition to the discount you get by using promo code DRG10, you can unlock special gifts with the purchase with retail values of at least $20. This is an amazing supplement. I really want you to try this. If you're having trouble sleeping, try it out. If you're gonna be traveling and have trouble sleeping, try it out. If you have trouble sleeping overall, try it out. It's amazing stuff. So again, there's a limited time offer for select orders. Go to sleepbreakthrough.com/DRG and use the code DRG10 for a discount. You mentioned about kids, and this is where I actually wanted to move, so I'm happy I think about myself, I probably would sit next to the toddler, but immediately put on my noise-canceling headphones and just be in my own world, right? Maybe give the toddler a smile midway.
What do you know?
Maybe a quick little smile, but when he's looking at me or she's looking at me, I envision it. But I have been on the planes without noise-canceling headphones and hearing the piercing sounds, especially if it was a night flight. I'm like, oh my God, I need to sleep, So I know what it feels like at this point in my life, so.
Yeah.
But talking about children now, if we haven't done any work on ourselves, we haven't set out with that emotional awareness, we haven't looked at our triggers, we haven't even asked how we've been raised and how I got here, and then we just have a kid. Will the kid inevitably start pushing a process within you, mom or dad?
Guaranteed. Guaranteed. I think that was probably, and having done a lot of healing work and, in the depths of my unraveling and breakdown to say yes to all of these new different modalities of healing from somatics and energetics and psychedelics and, all of it in different places around the world, I never really knew what the emotional capacity was in this bounce factor until I actually entered motherhood. And it's not just because you're sleep deprived. It's not just because you yourself are going through a tremendous death of your ego and reinvention and rebirth of yourself. You're tired, you're exhausted, your own inner child wounds, whatever is still unhealed, because we're all an onion, comes up, and then your partner's stuff comes up, and then you're having this child who is also going to trigger and bring up all of these complexities in you. And we were seasoned in the work. My husband also, is big in this process, and we had to recalibrate and really understand. It was personal development on steroids.
Wow.
Especially with our first. And you don't necessarily recognize that, which is why it really informed and kind of alchemized everything that I've been through. Because I can see this from a lens of, wow, my my traumas now of whatever, like my day to day of, all right, he's crying again. What am I going to do? I'm not, the milk's not coming out properly. And so then you're judging yourself. Am I a good mom? The postpartum depression, the hormones. And by the way, I didn't even know I was in the depth of that suck until I got out to actually see the contrast on the other side, to say, oh, wow, I was in that. I was in that mess or that tunnel for a really long time, and I didn't even know. And for my partner, for Ajit, to just be with me and sit with me in that, it took a lot of emotional regulation and a lot of us breathing and breaking down and crying and wailing together. It's a whole process, because also for me to actually even bring up some of the unhealed parts of myself that was so used to taking care of other people, because that was my coping mechanism. I'm going to be the martyr. I'm going to be last. And so even in those first few months, I would reject my super Indian mother-in-law from India. Like, she would cook for me because, the whole Ayurvedic 40-day period. And I was like, nope, I don't need any of that. Full on rejection, as if I was this rebellious teenager. Again, that inner rebellious teen was coming up again. And I had to sit with the fact that I am worthy even if I can't contribute. And I'm worthy of receiving this love and mothering from somebody else, because it had been a long time since I actually said yes to that. To then say, okay, we can now work on, now we have this baby. And when that baby turned 14 months, it was a whole different ballgame, because then it was, and for any listener who doesn't have kids, I mean, it's a whole spiritual awakening at this point. It is, I call it a spiritual practice, because imagine you not just sitting on a plane for 6 hours with a screaming kid, it's all day, every day. And that's where the real work comes in, because that's when the real work of, all right, am I going to transfer what I was told about emotions to this little one and say, stop crying right now. I'm going to give you something to cry about. I mean, these were some of the things that I heard when I was younger. We have so much chaos, I'll give you something to cry about. And so for me, it took a conscious awareness of, all right, my own tools, all right, let's breathe, let's put our hand over our heart, let's connect back to our body, let's go. And when he was a little bit older, it was, all right, let's name the emotion. I have a whole chapter when I'm telling a story around how, we were ghosted by a babysitter. We had just moved to Austin, and I had just given birth to my daughter, and my son he was 2 at this point, maybe even a little over 2. And I was so excited to have, an adult date with my husband. We had just moved into this home, new community, new everything. We were out of the 3-month bubble, baby newborn bubble. And I'm like, I just want to have an adult day, put on my strappy heels, look cute, get my, do my hair, all of the things. And so I looked for a babysitter, and I got this one young girl who said she was going to make it. And lo and behold, she doesn't even call. She doesn't show up. I texted her probably about 10 times, but I was ghosted. We were ghosted. And if you can imagine that mom rage, because I spent days and weeks putting together this whole, the schedule, and this was going to be the new babysitter that would come for the first time for our date, mind you, 3 hours. So I was all ready, and for her not to show up, and for her not to even call, and then just text, an hour later saying, all right, we're sorry, can't make it. I was livid, I was upset. I got into my little, and my son is looking at me like, Mama, what's wrong? Why are you, like, I'm pacing around the house back and forth. I'm like, I can't believe she would do this. Can't you just call? Like, we could have found a backup. Oh my gosh, we're gonna miss the tickets. Life happens, right? It's not these big T traumas anymore of the death, the loss, the seeing my parents through cancer and all these things. These are everyday human disappointments that will happen to test our patience, to test our emotional capacity to feel. So I'm in it real time. And so my son says, Mama, why are you stomping like a dinosaur? And so I'm like, you know what? You're right. And I just broke, and I broke in the biggest laughter, right? And so that's when I turned on this super ridiculous song. I mean, he was into dinosaurs at this stage. So we put on this EDM music, and it's like, flap your wings like a pterodactyl, stomp like a T-Rex. And it was, it's one of those, like, it's a booty shaking dinosaur song. And we just stomped and we danced, and it was fun. And then I told my husband, I'm like, let's go get some ice cream. And that was it. But it's in these moments of, all right, we've chosen to allow our kids to see us feel. Because so much of, I know in my upbringing, and I know a lot of people, they're growing up in situations where their parents hid that from them. And so then they're taught, all right, only certain emotions are okay with your kids. And I want our kids to be able to express and feel. And, now my daughter, she's almost 2, and you take something away from her, she's starting to scream. And again, it's so much easier to parent when we're like, all right, shut up right now. Don't you dare do that. Versus emotionally regulating yourself, taking a few deep breaths, and then going in and doing whatever you can. I mean, I have a whole list of ways to regulate in terms of screaming into a pillow, putting on a ridiculous song, being able to be with the discomfort of the feelings and shake it out, stomp it out. I think I shared with you one of those videos where I took 600 people. We did that song, by the way, Dinosaur Dance. I literally played it. I'm like, you're going to stop like my kid. And, but why is it that we give permission to ourselves to act like a child and stomp our misery away or stomp our feelings away when other people are around us? And in this practice, I thought, wow, if I would give them just a regular song to do that to, they're about, that we're like judging each other because we're in group or community with other people that we may not know, versus when I say, all right, put on a ridiculous song that you would dance to with your kids and stomp out that suck. It's interesting that, we all, in many ways, want to go back to that little child in us, the little kid, and give ourselves permission to play, to feel, to be without the necessary judgment, necessary judgment around it.
It's who we are. It's our authenticity. It's the embodiment of self in human form. And the irony is that kids do that so naturally, right? And you mentioned this being a parent, being this like spiritual boot camp. Like, you're going to go through it if you haven't. And I imagine this is how generational trauma is perpetuated. When we don't have the awareness and our children trigger us, if we haven't listened all our lives, our children are going to trigger us so much. And all of that emotion that is repressed from dad's dad, dad's dad's, mom's mom, everyone is just being brought out on the child. And their voice is being repressed. And this is just how it's perpetuated over and over. But we can break that trauma, right? And we're at the point now where we have education, awareness, access to the content on how to do it. There's 20 people doing it. You try all 20 ways, you're going to find a way, right?
True.
This podcast, we're talking about it. No one was talking about this in the 90s.
No.
I remember.
No.
Back when YouTube came out, nothing, But now we have people talking about, wow, if you have kids, here's your time. And You're saying that maybe, just maybe, when you're finding yourself being exactly like your mom or dad and saying, hey, no, don't, you're a big boy now, no crying. You allow the child to express, but more importantly, you and your partner expressing. You allowing that space for your child to see you express, which is essential, right? Because what I've found, and at least in my work, is this is what it is. It's so many of people grow up with what was allowed and not allowed in the home. What was safe and unsafe? What did dad show? What did mom show? When mom did this, what did dad do? What did dad? And then by the time we're 7, 8 years old, we know exactly the boy or girl we need to be.
Exactly.
So it's powerful, that recommendation of, no, show your emotion. Your child saw you in your anger stomping, and then he saw you laughing and moving that energy, and he did it with you. Most importantly, how important is to have a child do these processes with you, participating, and know that, hey, mom does it, it's okay, it's not scary. Dad does it, it's okay, it's not scary.
It's safe.
It's safe. Is that a major key for having the child learn to express his or her emotions?
Oh my gosh, 100%. I mean, have them see, I think when we think of our big emotions, our rage, our anger, our disappointment, our sadness, our crying, our wailing, we're so afraid of letting them see the bigness in our emotions. But I think what we're really afraid of is what we do with those emotions. Because obviously it's not going to be safe if they're seeing us punch a wall or project, our anger at somebody else. It's the ways that we're supposed to healthily demonstrate, well, what are we doing with this anger? Right? And I think that's the difference in that. Yes, of course, if we're seeing our kid hit somebody else, we're going to say, absolutely not, we don't do that. And that is not a good display of showing anger. You can actually cry, hit, wail, take your pillow. And I think that is the difference of why many times parents, or when we're in that frequency, we think, oh my gosh, I have to stop them. Well, yeah, not if they're having their experience, have their experience, but also how are you expressing? And are you actually okay with these emotions that we many times judge because we think that it's not socially acceptable? But really what we're afraid of is how we actually execute on those.
And just by executing on that, truly like from their heart and being like, okay, no, I have an emotion and this is how it's going to be expressed, that's giving the child so much permission.
It's giving them permission that, oh, okay, I can be angry.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I can be sad and cry because I see my dad cry, and that's okay. And to see even the witnessing of somebody else, like a partner, another caregiver, to allow that, to not even try to console or try to even, but just to be there.
That it's okay.
That all of it is okay. That we're not trying to say, okay, babe, it's all good now, But you're actually sitting there with it. The good, the bad, the messy, all of it, all at the same time.
Children see the full authenticity of mom and dad and see that, mimic it, and then know that it's safe, right? So I always tell like my clients, I'll be like, listen, right now what you're doing for your son's gonna know exactly what a woman means, right? So a woman in her full authenticity, he's not gonna settle for less as he gets older. A mom's gonna see her mom full. This is what it is to be a woman. Boy's gonna see dad, right? This is how it happens. We learn. Anger came up a few times, and that's a very common emotion that I see. And I'm sure that people are just holding in so much, especially because society doesn't fully accept it, especially in men, certainly in women. How, when you're inevitably angry, does your child witness that? What do you do? How is anger in the Dr. Neeta household?
Oof. Anger's a fun emotion. So yeah, I take my pillow and we're like, all right, we're gonna scream into a pillow right now. Where is my pillow? And Ari has, his dinosaur pillows or whatever. Now he's into tigers, so we have this whole thing. But we have actually a little calming corner in our house, thanks to the folks at Generation Mindful. And anyways, for any parent out there, I mean, I got this when he was like 14 months old, but it's such a beautiful map of all of these different feelings. And it's almost like, did you ever play Guess Who when you were growing up? Okay. It's kind of like Guess Who, but they're actually posters. And they're posters of these people with like these different emotions. And some of them are happy and frustrated and sad. There's about like, I don't know, maybe 20. However, for him to actually see this poster and for him to actually have another poster that's some of these healing activities, or it's processing activities that he can actually do. So we have a whole corner where it's drawing, coloring, a pillow in there, music, drums, so all of these different ways if he and how he wants to express that emotion. So usually now, because we've got this whole screen, he's 4 now, so we have this whole screen time situation, and many times we'll say, okay, no, we're done, you watched your episode and we're done. And of course the meltdown will come. And it's big. It's like, why did you take that away? I want to watch more.
Wow.
And it's big, and it's like, okay. And you're like, all right, I'm with this. I'm with this. And in the beginning, that was even hard. And so, especially after a long day and you're working and you're doing, and then you're tired or you haven't slept because you got a baby, a newborn that hasn't slept and kept you up at night, it is so easy to get triggered. And then mama gets all flustered and says, all right, okay, I need a break. I need a breather. You know what? We're going to scream right now because you're upset. Mama's upset. I'm feeling angry, mama. Okay, great. I'm feeling angry too. Let's go scream it out. So then we'll set a timer because I love timers with my kid. My oldest, he needs to have these transition times. So I'm like, all right, we're going to set the timer for 30 seconds. Okay, 30 seconds. So then I take my pillow. And even if I'm angry and they're home and I'm with, it's like I have my pillow, he has his pillow, but screaming into that. Many times what I'll notice is you can't scream for that long.
I know. You'll wear you down for a while.
It turns into laughter.
Yeah.
It just automatically transmutes into laughter. So then you're starting to do laughing yoga and we didn't even plan for it.
Then you're giggling.
And you're giggling and you're laughing, and sometimes, when it's really big, then we're screaming and then it turns into crying.
Right.
Which is also okay.
That I've seen.
Because you know that the crying is actually, it needed to purge itself out. It needed to come out. And even, this is the big thing that I've learned even with my kids, and you probably see it with your patients as well, is that when they are feeling uncomfortable, and when we're feeling uncomfortable, we're acting out, we're trying to elicit a response from our partner, from our significant other to just say like, I want to feel seen by you. Don't you feel seen? Don't you want to see me? I just want to feel heard by you. But all we're actually asking for is, hey, I've had a really rough day. Can I just get a hug? Or can I just feel held right now? We don't know how to ask for what we need.
Right.
And it's the same thing with our kids. Our kids are even multi-stimulated in all of the ways. When they come home and they're acting up, they're acting out, they're not doing it to be a pest. They're doing it to actually scream and say, hey, mama, I just need a hug. But they don't know how to do that. So that their little bodies are like, "Marr!" And then it turns out into chaos. But we could actually sit with them, go to their level and say, okay, these are big feelings. And many times when you just like eye to eye, the crying starts and then all they needed was that. And then they melt. And then it's like, okay, let's go play toys. Whatever it is, it's like, oh, what just happened here?
Well, that's how you've mastered at least the emotional part of your child and helping them walk through these emotions. I love and am inspired whenever my kid comes in the future, knock on wood, to have that little corner, to have little stations or something where, how do we get this energy out together? And I love that you do it together. I love that you don't say, okay, scream and I'm going to watch you and I'm going to set the timer myself. Giving permission to both do it together is the bonding experience.
Well, because I feel like, the whole idea of the whole timeout situation, I'm like, yeah, okay, fine, they need timeout. But what if, would we want to be sent to, to a corner by ourselves when we're actually like grieving and feeling this pain maybe sometimes, but sometimes you just want to be around people and the people that you love, not like get shunned into your room.
Right.
And so that's my whole idea of, and again, do whatever works for you, but I feel like I want to be there with them, you know, and again, it's harder. It's harder to do. It's not normal to go in that process with them. But I think to give ourselves permission to sit with them in those emotions to then help them process that.
Yeah, yeah. And it's your healing too. It's never a mistake. Even their moments are your moments.
Absolutely.
It's the same. Okay, look, the book, that sucks. Now what?
That sucked.
That sucked. Not sucks.
Yeah.
Not this sucks. Definitely this sucks. That sucked.
That sucked, yeah.
And just some tidbits. What are we going to find in there for the people viewing this and they go, okay, I love this girl. I'm inspired. I'm going to get this book. What can we find in there?
Oof, okay, so it's broken down into 3 parts. So the first part is your magical moment of suck. And that is the breakdown. That is getting into why we do certain things, exploring our entitlement, exploring our privilege, exploring parts of ourselves where, are we reacting because we have a chip on our shoulder? And are we reacting from a place of lack? Because that then stems our reality of, are we feeling resentment? And why is it that sometimes we're addicted to our suck? Why are we addicted to our pain? And we want to just sit in that suck for a really long time and stew in it and think the world is out to get us and the world is not fair to us. And we explore our own victimhood and why we get into that victim spiral, and knowing that victim spiral is normal. Our ego is wanting to keep us safe. So we go and explore all of that in part 1. And then part 2 of the book, we get into the bounce factor. So you'll get into the 4 different pillars. We actually go into generational healing and generational trauma and why why we do certain things if we're open to kind of looking under the hood, and then getting into how we create good stress and what that good stress and creating that environment for us to grow in and evolve into that next evolution of ourselves. And then we get into, how do we actually express our emotional capacity to feel, as well as tuning into that radical self-awareness. So that's all in part 2. And then part 3, we get into, all right, how do we fly forward? How do we fly forward past some of these moments? And what are some of the emotions and the feelings that we are going to feel when we do have a fall, when we are in a very big shock and state? But then how do we get out of it repeatedly so that we know how to get from falling to igniting to magnifying to then rising and thriving at the end? But knowing that when we get to thriving, we're not just, all right, immune to sucky moments from happening, but we could actually then reframe and, take personal responsibility to know that, all right, what else are we learning as we up level in ourselves at every chance? And really to embrace the magic and the mess that we all collectively share. And we are seeing that through a lens of our human experience if we're actually open to it.
I love that. That's the framework. All in, looks like 200 something pages maybe.
Yeah.
No, yeah, right. See, I got a good eye for these things.
You do. It's pretty good.
A nice framework. Thank you so much. How do people find you on Instagram, on your website, wherever you are hanging out?
Oh gosh, so I hang out on Instagram at Neeta Bhushan, and actually when you do get the book at thatsuckednowwhat.com, you actually get the free 44-page healing manual that comes along with this, as well as a 5-day fly forward healing practice of meditations, and we go into affirmations to start healing our relationships and reconciling back to ourselves.
I love that. I love that. And your website?
Yeah, so it's thatsuckednowwhat.com.
Love it.
And that's where you get everything.
Making big moves. You're kicking down the door, the emotional door, and you're saying, hey, it's time to feel your emotions. It's time to grow. It's time to heal those wounds generationally and within yourself. Especially if you're having a kid, you better get this book right now.
Let's go.
Thank you so much for joining the show. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your heart, what you're doing in this world. I see it, I feel it, and it's a pleasure to have you.
Dr. G, amazing.
All right.
My guy.
Adderall, what is it? Well, it's a central nervous system stimulant. And it's indicated for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. And it's given to children, but also adolescents and even adults. How does it work, right? So some of you have taken Adderall out there and have felt the effects 30, 40, maybe an hour into it, and have seen, whoa, I'm super focused. Whoa, I feel like I can read this whole book front to back 3 times. Whoa, I feel really present in this moment. I'm not thinking about the future or the past. Adderall in itself is a powerful medicine. But how does it work? Well, it's an amphetamine. It's a non-catecholamine sympathomimetic amine with activity in the central nervous system as a stimulant. So what the heck does that mean? It's basically a neurohormone that stimulates adrenaline and dopamine that makes you wired, but feeling good at the same time. It works very similarly to meth. Now, when you look at the package insert for Adderall, there's a box warning. And it says in big letters, there's a high potential for abuse. Prolonged administration may lead to dependence. And a misuse of amphetamines may cause sudden death and serious cardiovascular adverse events. So, it's a federally controlled substance because it can be abused and lead to dependence, and we know this. And one of the messages for doctors when using and prescribing this is evaluate the patient's history, including all their family history of abuse, dependence on alcohol, prescription medications, or illicit drugs, right? Really get a good idea for your patient in front of you. I'm gonna tell you something. Not every doctor does this. I remember in college how easy it was to set up and make an appointment with a doctor and pretend you're having trouble focusing just to get a prescription. Now, I never felt like I needed Adderall, but my God, everyone was doing it in college. In the early 2000s, Adderall was everywhere and it became rampant and actually has become more popular over the years. Adderall prescriptions dispensed in the United States spiked up to 41.4 million last year. That's up 10.4% from 2020, according to the IQVIA data. Now, to give you an idea, in 2012, it wasn't 41.4 million, it was 16 million. In 2005, when I was in college, it was 9 million. Now, according to the New York Times, I have an awesome article called Generation Adderall. By 2004, Adderall was the second most abused illicit drug behind marijuana. And recently, there was a shortage on Adderall. More than 2 months, we saw how addictive Adderall was in the populations. Students could not focus in school anymore without Adderall. And pharmacists were actually reporting students coming in not being able to refill their prescription and being anxious and sometimes even aggressive addiction. Now, Adderall's effect on the brain can sometimes mimic methamphetamine addiction in those who abuse Adderall, right? We develop a tolerance to the drug and are unable to function normally without it. And going into addiction with Adderall is a big problem because the withdrawal comes. So who is not fit to take Adderall? What people out there? Well, people with advanced arteriosclerosis, sympathomimetic cardiovascular diseases, moderate to severe hypertension, high blood pressure, hyperthyroidism. If you have a known hypersensitivity to these type of medications, glaucoma, living in an agitated state with your mood disorders or emotional issues, history of drug abuse, or during or within 14 days following the administration of a monoamine oxidase inhibitor. Over 5% of children out there who are prescribed Adderall have a loss of appetite, insomnia, abdominal pain, emotional lability, vomiting, nervousness, nausea, and fever. With abdominal pain being up there at 14%, the loss of appetite being at 22%, and insomnia being 17%. Now, over 5% of adolescents have a loss of appetite, insomnia, abdominal pain, weight loss, nervousness. Loss of appetite being 36%, abdominal pain being 11%, insomnia being 12%. But interestingly enough, it is the adults who suffer with the most amount of side effects from Adderall. Over 5% of adults have dry mouth, loss of appetite, insomnia, headache, weight loss, nausea, anxiety, agitation, dizziness, tachycardia, right, a fast heartbeat, diarrhea, and urinary tract infections, with 26% getting a headache, 35% getting dry mouth, 33% with a loss of appetite, and 13% with nervousness. Now, what are some other side effects that we see? Increased blood pressure, psychotic events and mania, even with a no prior history. One thing that is really concerning to me when I was reading about this in the literature is suppressing long-term growth in children. Could actually cause your child not to grow the way that your child would be growing without Adderall. It's incredible. Seizures, if you have Raynaud's disease, causing vascular issues, and tics. Now, this is very important because Adderall is a stimulant. Any stimulant drugs should not be used in patients who have structural cardiac abnormalities, like cardiomyopathy, serious heart rhythm abnormalities, coronary artery disease, or any other heart issues. Why? Because there's actually been reports of children and adolescents dying from these medications when they have heart abnormalities. So you have to make sure your heart is right if you ever take Adderall. Long-term abuse is likely with Adderall, and it can put you at risk for heart disease, stroke, dental problems, right? Because it's reducing saliva, and other mood disorders. So the CDC published in the Journal of Pediatrics a study, and according to the study, 4,777 youth have died of a drug overdose in 2019 in the United States. 902 of those deaths were overdoses from psychostimulants like Adderall. And according to the Drug Abuse Warning Network, which tracks drug-related visits to the emergency rooms across the United States, in 2013, they reported that there was 17,000 Adderall-related visits to the emergency departments back in 2011. And that was over a 650% increase from 2004. So when it comes to Adderall and addiction, there are some studies on addiction, but not enough. What we do see is current or former college students are more likely to abuse Adderall than anyone. And we know Adderall increases dopamine, so this is where the addiction begins. And this is why that pharmacist in the New York Times article reported students acting anxious, agitated, aggressive, because the addiction was kicking in. Now, we have to look for signs of addiction when taking Adderall. What happens is there's an unnatural push of hormones in the body. And remember, the body always compensates. For every action, there's a reaction. So now, when your hormones are all the way up and you're off the Adderall, there's a really drop down to a valley, and all of a sudden we start seeing things like mental fog, low energy, sleeping very poorly, mood changes start acting up, right? More anxiety, more panic attacks, depression comes up. And now people who dependent on Adderall are not able even to get their work done. They're not able to focus. Adderall withdrawal is very real, and this can last for days up to weeks for certain people. My recommendation is if you absolutely need Adderall to function, then I would explore it. It's misused, it's overabused. There's people who cannot even find presence in the moment to study and instead find distraction in so much. But look at the world we live in. Not only the foods we eat that can be inflammatory to the brain, go back a few episodes, I even spoke about the foods that cause ADHD-like symptoms, but also we're on our phone all the time. And our attention span has gone down over the years. So of course, ADHD is going to be diagnosed more often, but really the bigger question is what's happening with us. So if you have ADHD or identify with having ADHD, you got to look at a bigger picture. What are some root causes that we need to really explore? Hypoallergenic diet. If you're eating foods that are inflammatory, hyperexcitable in the brain, it's going to cause focus issues, for sure. It's going to cause behavioral issues, for sure, especially in children. So you want to explore hypoallergenic foods, foods that are not going to stimulate the immune system, that are not going to inflame the body, and going into something like an elimination diet. Remove all the foods that are causing issues and start introducing foods slowly but surely over time to make sure the body's reacting positively. And on the last show, as I mentioned, I talked about the foods that worsen ADHD. So go back a few episodes and write down the foods, especially if you have a child who has been diagnosed with quote unquote ADHD. Ask your naturopathic doctor about the following. Do we know that children actually who present with ADHD usually have an increase in pathogenic bacteria in the gut? So when they take a poop test, not only is there a reduced amount of diversity of good bacteria in the gut, but they have an increase in those pathogenic bacteria. They may have an increase in yeast, they may have an increase in parasites. So working on the gut is essential. You'll also want to check for proper micronutrient deficiency. That's super essential. Many of these foods, these vitamins, these minerals, these antioxidants are helping the proper functioning of neurotransmitters and hormones in the body while supporting the brain and the nervous system, right? So you need to optimize the building blocks first before we start doing any medications. Very important. Always check for liver function, heavy metals, toxins, pesticides. Why? Because a lot of these can affect the brain negatively and cause hyperexcitability in the brain, lack of focus, mood changes, affect the gut, which is causing, again, a circled loop back to the brain, leaky gut, leaky brain, leaky gut, leaky brain. And we're seeing issues that are lending itself to an inflammatory process happening in the brain that we're calling ADHD. And from the emotional standpoint, we have to look at this as a bigger picture. I actually believe there's a big piece for ADHD that is not being diagnosed or not even being looked at, not even by naturopathic or functional doctors. We have to look at the emotional component of ADHD. What happens when there's an unbearable, unwitnessable emotion that wasn't allowed to be safe in the home? What happens? Well, we repress that emotion into our body and we hold it and we protect it. We can't just hold that energy and not express it. It has to come out some way, somehow. And for many children, that energy comes out as a protective mechanism that we call ADHD. So really, When I see someone with ADHD and they're physiologically okay, they've done all the tests, right? We checked their gut, we checked their micronutrient status, right? We have a full picture of all the foods they're eating, and everything looks good, but they're still presenting with ADHD. My question is, what's happening in the home? What is safe and unsafe in the home? Is a child suffering with a repressed emotion because they're not allowed to be, for example, angry, and they have to show up with a protection of ADHD, right? That energy has to go somewhere, especially when you're a kid. And that ADHD can go away when you get older, but present as something else when you're older, like anxiety or depression or OCD or addiction. So really, we always have to look at the emotional component of ADHD, and the best doctors who are looking at the holistic model for healing are the ones who are doing this and intervening in this way. So look at the big picture. If you or someone you love suffers with ADHD, Adderall is far from the answer. Adderall is often misused, and it's something that we need to start stepping away from. Too many people are using it. There you go. That's the Knowledge Bomb ADHD. I really hope that helped. Check out our merch, hts.today. We got the best of the best, cleanest, sustainable, organic, and it's beautiful stuff.